Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdic Steve, and today I'm joined by Spike Murphy Rose. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Good, good. First of all, I need to thank you for coming on because it was very last minute. We had a switch up in the schedule. Someone was having some issues, so you came on and helped us out. I really appreciate that. And also, we've been talking for a while. You've been freelancing in the industry for a bit, and I connected with you via Nord Games originally, I believe.
Yeah.
And we've been chatting for a while, so it's good to get you on and kind of like virtually meet, I guess. That's not in a chat.
Yeah. Well, actually, so our original connection was through Nord Games, but I didn't know that. I remember Facebook had recommended, I don't know, a Facebook recommended friend or something, but we became friends on Facebook. And then I tried to pitch you on promoting Nord Games. You're like, dude, I already do that.
That is a very strong possibility. I get so many messages through Facebook, Twitter, to the pages personally, and then emails. I have no idea sometimes what I've talked about with people, and sometimes I think people feel like you're ignoring them, and it's not that. It's just like we're just inundated all the time.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's just the natural marketer in me. As soon as I saw oh hey, there's a possibility here. Like I gotta try. I didn't bother to check with Nord. Like hey, do we already have a relationship with David Nerdarchy?
Yeah, we've been working with Chris for a long time. Actually, like some of the difficulties internally is me having to learn to not go to Chris, just because I'm used to dealing with him directly, and following the chain of command, and especially after Megan took over in marketing and doing stuff over there, I kept going around and I'm like, oh wait a minute, no, I need to go to Megan, and she also does an awesome job over there, or did, I should say.
Yeah. She's left Nord, just left Nord at this point. She's had a lot to deal with the pandemic. But we wish her the best, and it was mutual, no issues there. She would be welcome to come back anytime. But yeah, she had to do what was best for her situation at the time. So
yeah, absolutely. That's a great loss to Nord. We've had her on the live chat. We've chatted, and I got to meet Megan at GameholeCon last year, which was cool. I don't know who's gonna set up your booth now, because she was like a bull. She just threw that thing together by herself.
Oh yeah, she is amazing. Not only was she an amazing marketer, she's a great GM. I've had the privilege of having her GM for me, and ran an amazing murder mystery. And as you know, running mysteries is hard. Running mysteries that don't just frustrate your players is even harder. And she did a fantastic job. And it was, and she's not had a lot of experience in GMing. She's even contributed to the latest Nord book, the Alchemy. Crafting, and oh my god, what's the last thing? There's one more thing on there. It's our alchemy book.
Yeah. Magic items? Is it magic items?
Magic items are part of it, but
yeah, it's got a long title and it does a lot of things.
Everyone calls it. Yeah, internally we all call it alchemy, and now I'm very embarrassed that.
Oh, dude, I totally get it. You'll work on a project for 12 months or however long you work on it, and you have an internal name for it. So when you actually release it and it has its real name, it's so hard to switch over.
Yeah, Ultimate Guide to Alchemy, Crafting, and Enchanting. I was on the right track.
So close.
Yeah, but she helped contribute a lot to that. Very, very creative. So, yeah, hopefully we will see her popping up again, either for Nord or working for someone else. But I think it won't be the last we see of her in the industry, because she does great work just all around.
So, you've been freelancing for a while. How long have you been freelancing in the industry?
Only about a year and a half at this point.
Okay.
And
it's not really new anymore, right? I mean,
yeah, I guess it's not super new, and I had my focus is on the e-commerce side of things and the technical side of things. I'm a rules lawyer. That is how I play, how I run, and that's what I bring to my work as well. So my specialty is getting people into Google or Amazon or wherever, and helping them sell their products there and make them visible. but I've always been passionate about gaming. I have a couple of friends who have been game writers or designers over the years that I've helped out, whether my buddy Talon Waite, who does a bunch of small press, like print-on-demand stuff, usually for like Fate System and stuff like that, or T.S. Lukart from over at Cubicle 7. He wrote a bunch of their Warhammer and One Ring stuff. He taught me how to game pretty much growing up. He was like one of my gaming mentors when I was a kid here in Santa Cruz. Mike Pondsmith wrote Cyberpunk and Mechton back here in Santa Cruz and play tested it with the local game store, which I just missed on. But I remember seeing them in the thank you notes for those books and calling to the store, be like, "Are you the same Game-A-Lot that's in the front of the Mechton and Cyberpunk books?" They're like, "Oh yeah, Mike's an old friend and moved away like a year or two ago." And
so close.
Yeah, so close. But I've talked to Lisa and their son over the years for first like the Mechton Kickstarter, and then just more recently with Cyberpunk stuff. I have some cosplayer friends that run a cosplay studio that we're going to do a bunch of Cyberpunk and Witcher cosplay for them at like Gen Con and stuff like that.
Oh, sweet. Well, you kind of going back to the year and a half. If you did anything for a year and a half and it wasn't working, at that point you'd be homeless. So something must be working.
Oh, yeah. Well, and especially at this point, online is such a big emphasis, even more so than it was before because of the pandemic. And so that was something where there's a lot of folks, even though there's been a lot of hits in the gaming industry. Like I know one of my clients I've been working with just shifted their focus from cons to like, okay, we need to do big holiday sales and really push our online sales on the website then. And it just moved the resources from the con budget over to essentially like a holiday marketing budget. And they're not the only company I've been seeing doing that. So it's really smart.
Don't worry. The other day we had Zach Glazer on, and we've almost got the virtual con all figured out, where we're going to all use VR headsets and go to conventions again. We're so close. All we need is like all the tech and stuff, and we're there.
Yeah, it'd be almost like that. Luc Besson movie. It was terrible. It was like The City of a Thousand Worlds or whatever. But it had that great sequence in the beginning where they go to the interdimensional bazaar where you have to put on a VR headset to be able to even see like the Sigil marketplace, essentially.
Like I think of like Player One.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
It could be like that. But that being said, I've never even used VR. So, but I know what he was. He was telling me that there's like movie rooms that you can go into in VR and watch movies with other people, sort of.
Oh yeah. Actually, there's a lot like that kind of deluxe entertainment experience. There's a lot of desire for that. My brother is involved with a startup down in LA that caters to that specifically. So you can rent. It's more for video game players, but you can rent like a deluxe game room that's got its own, draft beer and a fully stocked bar and like VR headsets and a, theater seating and stuff like that. And, just like top of the line equipment. And if you just want to do your Anthem tournament or Destiny 2 or whatever with your buddies or Divinity 2 or, go and play an old Baldur's Gate game, whatever you want, you can rent that deluxe gaming experience. And, it's there's a lot of appeal for that kind of for dipping your toes, for getting the gaming experience now, which like you and I were talking about earlier before we went live, is very different from growing up when like playing D&D could like get you literally stuffed in a locker. And
the good old days.
The good old days. Yeah, and I remember I've literally been stuffed in a locker, so I know very different seeing the way it's treated now. Like, you play D&D?
Thankfully I was kind of a fat kid, so just not fit in lockers.
Yeah. I was a little kid, but I started playing saxophones. I had a big heavy case to carry with me, and that prevented a lot of that.
Nice. So you were also a band geek.
Oh yeah, band geek. I've worn a lot of hats. I was a band geek. I've been playing D&D since I was 10. I started with Tunnels and Trolls from Flying Buffalo, and rest in peace, Rick. Miss him, but Flying Buffalo games with Tunnels and Trolls and Grimtooth's Book of Traps, of course. some classic fantasy there, and then quickly moved on to D&D. Though I think the first ad for D&D I saw when I got curious was in like '86 in the back of a Marvel Transformers comic.
Okay.
I always, that red dragon, that cover or image for it that Jeff Easley did. I always remember that.
It is, yeah. I mean, that's the classic. Like, it's good and bad because that guy will be known for that above all other things.
Oh yeah, dragons are what he does.
It's so iconic. So Eric says many artists drawing kind are twisting in the wind without cons. There are some virtual cons, though most don't focus on drawn art, but written art and products instead. Ideas on how to remedy that?
Well, so first thing is ask people to buy your product. That is one of the most basic steps of marketing that is a stumbling block for a lot of people because we are taught to be polite and we don't want to be asking people like, hey, buy this. But unless you make a direct appeal to people, no matter how it's like being in a relationship with your significant other. Like if you don't actually tell them, you can't expect them to know what you're thinking, no matter how much you think you're telegraphing that. And so the first thing is like start putting your art out there. Tell the groups that you're in. Tell the any gaming groups on Facebook or Discord or anything like that. You don't need to spam it, but let people know like, hey, this is available. Find ways that you can showcase your art, whether that's through Instagram or again, like shared art groups are really good. Like that is where I have found artists that I've wanted to commission to do art either for my personal games, for like NPCs and stuff, or when I've been working with companies like Nord, when we start recruiting artists, one of the first places we look is like, who have we seen? What have we liked? And a lot of that's like what's come through our social media feeds. And yeah, like openly, but just it never hurts to ask, like, are you looking for an artist? If there's a project you like, if you're getting in early on a Kickstarter, there's no reason you can't contact them and say like, hey, here's my portfolio. I would be interested in working on this if you're still looking for people to hire, because they may have a bunch of their art assets already, but there's other stuff they're going to want to commission later on. And, as much as that's probably advice people have heard before, the most important thing is just get yourself out there and let people know my work is available.
Be shameless.
Yeah, exactly. And be proud. Like, it's not so much about being shameless, but be proud of your work. You deserve to be proud of the work that you do. Just because it's not something that gets featured on critical, like, the top thing featured on Critical Role each week or whatever, doesn't mean that your art isn't good. Doesn't mean that, and I should say too, there are a lot of very well-known artists that participate in these groups and give feedback and are more than happy to help give people feedback and advice. Like Todd Lockwood. You want to talk about legendary dragon artists? Todd Lockwood is right up there with Jeff Easley. He's iconic. He is like 3E D&D. You can't have that without Todd Lockwood's art. He's active in multiple Facebook art communities just daily. I chat with him pretty regularly, and I'm not even another artist, but he's like, they're out there and they're more than happy to give that advice and help pass the torch to this new generation as best they can.
Yeah. So I think like in a lot of the business things that happen in the industry, like I guess let me circle back. You can quote me as saying gamers tend to make awful business people for the most part, is because they get into it because they're passionate about something or they have the love for the hobby, and but then there's this whole other side of the stuff that has nothing to do with the actual gaming, right? And that is, whether you're talking about marketing and promoting or just, the logistics side of things.
Yeah. Or running a game store.
Yeah. Sounds like a great idea until you have to deal with inventory and taxes and, I remember one of my favorite comic book stores growing up as a kid. It turns out like they were like tens of thousands of dollars in debt with the IRS just because they didn't pay their taxes.
Yeah.
And it's an easy trap to fall into.
Yeah. So libertarian game store owners, it's definitely a thing. I've run into it way too many times to not see that as a trend, which also means tax issues usually.
Yeah.
And yeah, like just because you're good at one thing doesn't mean that you're going to be good at everything. Or like even if you think they're related, doesn't mean that those are going to cross over. Some things do. Like I've been fortunate. My rules lawyering in D&D definitely carries over to like picking apart a spreadsheet and coding it to do like automation and stuff like that. But at the same time, that's not going to make me great at doing graphic design. Just because like I love games, I talk to game artists. I've been playing D&D most of my life. I can't draw a decent dragon. Like it's not gonna. No matter how much I know the rules of D&D, I still can't draw a dragon well. So these things just don't cross over. And recognizing that is a huge step for some. One of the companies I work with, Bard Games, it just brought me on to help with their holiday marketing campaigns. The owners are great. They have made some really great games with just beautiful visual artwork, but they both recognize that their strengths are like, we're not gonna like the marketing stuff is not what draws us. It's not where our strengths are. And rather than trying to do like a half-assed job essentially, or have that it be like we'll do this when we get to it. It's better just we're gonna hire people that have expertise and let them like handle that and are looking to us for those guidelines there. And that willingness to be able to hear that is huge, especially in marketing, because and the marketers need to hear that too, because a lot of marketers don't understand the technical side of things. If you have someone who's trying to market your product and they don't understand how, like the basic premise of D&D, for instance, they're going to fall flat. They're going to use, I've seen agencies working with companies that tell them to heavily advertise on online MMORPG terms and stuff like that. And it's just like, that's not what this is. And while you might have a crossover audience, like it's not worth bidding against Blizzard. It's not worth trying to compete against World of Warcraft when you're a third-party game publisher.
No.
I mean, even these days, a big thing because of everyone going to VTT, D&D Online. Like that's a huge search term. There's a lot of people that are suddenly looking for online D&D games. DDO, D&D Online, is a long-running MMO that still exists, and while they're similar, you might not be looking for you might be looking for one but not the other, and that creates this major question for everyone on both sides. Like, how do we differentiate this so that we can let people find what they're looking for? How do we advertise to this without getting deep into a market that we're not going to be able to actually reach or isn't looking for our product?
And that is tough because on the consumer side, you're just looking for what you're looking for, and you're not thinking about that. But as a marketer, you have to be like, okay, who are using these search terms? Who are you going to end up speaking to, whether it's intentionally or not? I mean, as someone who has to use keywords often, whether it's for SEO on a YouTube video or a website article, you run into the same thing.
Yeah, and SEO is a huge part of that, and visibility, because and that's another one of those things where people aren't always aware. A lot of people aren't aware of when they're getting into running their own game company or having their own website. Is you need people to be able to find you, and that's what SEO, search engine optimization is, and it's holistic. It's not like it was back in the day where it's like, okay, you make sure you have this field filled out, or you have this plugin, or you hit these keywords, X number of times on a page. It's everything. It's how are your images titled? How are they labeled in the meta tags? What's the meta description of your site? What are they crawling like? And they are crawling your images for text these days.
Yeah.
What other, everything about your presence online as a company is going into how your search visibility is determined. And that ultimately determines how much you're paying for any kind of advertising that you're doing online as well, since it's all holistic and like mapped together.
So Joe asked the question, is there a market for drawings with lore? I think there is, but it's like anything. Like, you're always trying to figure out what there's a market for. And sometimes you have a cool idea and there just isn't. And other times you don't think there's a market and you just start doing something and people start glomming onto it.
Yeah.
So you have to do it to figure it out.
Yeah, that's how I would feel about that too. Like, I think there could be a market for that. Sure, there's definitely some people who would be interested in that. Oh, not Hero Forge. They're Arcane Foundry, whatever their competitor
Oh,
is.
Is it
Eldritch
Eldritch?
Foundry.
Yeah.
Eldritch Foundry. So that was one of the things that they did, or were claiming they were going to do, was have, like, you got your character portrait, and it would give you some kind of basic background or lore or something about the character.
Yeah.
So there's definitely an appeal there, and people want that. But again, it's finding that market. Like, some DMs would love that. Now, having a packet of pre-made handouts of like NPC drawings that on the back had game agnostic like backgrounds and personality attributes and info about them that I could then drop into any game, like, I would be down to buy like a dozen of those off of, Drive Through RPG, or do a print on demand, or even get that through, a website or Etsy or something like that. Like, if you can, it may not be that the idea on its face is like has a lot of appeal, but you may have to think about, like, how do you package that? How do you make that something that people are going to suddenly be like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah. So sometimes you have to tell people they want it and then tell them why.
Yeah.
Like, so, I mean, this is probably super boring for people, but whatever. Get your own show. No, like, so like, I nerd out on things like sales letters, and, internally we talk about this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and, like, I used to spend a lot of time reading different ones that I wouldn't ever buy anything from, but these super long sales letters, they go into great detail of explaining a problem, right, that you never knew existed, but then, like, by the time you get like halfway through the sales letter, like, oh my god, the world is going to end, how do I fix this catastrophe? And then they're like, but wait, we have a solution. But like, when you boil that down, when you have an idea, that's what you have to figure out. Like, what is the problem you're going to solve for people, and give them the solution. And sometimes they don't know that they have the problem, but if you can sell them the problem, then you can also give them the solution. And that's not like, this very neutral. Like, I know people don't like the term sell a lot of times, but it's very neutral because it can be a good thing. Like, maybe it has been a problem or a pain point for you and other people, and they just didn't know it. And when it gets pointed out, you're like, oh, and then the solution's there, like having art with lore to it that a DM or GM could just drop right into their game.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, you need to make people see that problem, feel that problem, see it as their problem, and then they're looking for that solution if they're not already there. And that's about, like, identifying where people are at in I guess in their hierarchy of needs, as far as or their hierarchy of purchase, really, the purchase funnel is, like, at what point are they looking for more information? Do they already know they have a problem, so I need to present the solution? Do they not know that they have a problem? Like, maybe you don't know that your D&D game could be more fun if you had the critical hit and luck decks from Nord Games, which you can get at nordgamesllc.com/5.html, which is the affiliate link for Nerdarchy, and will not only get you a discount on your purchase, but will also give a small kickback to Nerdarchy to help them make great shows like this.
Oh, well, thank you. I forgot. Also, there's links in the pinned post, as always. Pinned comment. I forgot that there's a discount on that as well.
Yeah, Nordarchy 20 will get you a 20% discount on any purchase made at Nord Games, and will give credit to Nerdarchy.
Yeah, I'll put that in there so people know.
But yeah, like, you gotta. Sometimes it's finding out. Like, I have a client that's not game related, but is in Amazon. They're a major apparel client, and they were unaware that because of some weird issues in their upload process, that half of their inventory was essentially getting deactivated by Amazon. It was just sitting there, either not getting sent in the first place, or was getting sent to warehouses and then just not showing up online and sitting there for like a year before getting sent back. And so that was a big thing, where it's like, you don't know you have this problem, but you do, and you need it fixed, and I know how to fix it. That said, as someone who works in marketing and advertising, don't trust marketers and advertisers. Double check everything we tell you. Get a second opinion on anything that you get told or presented as far as a plan or what your site needs or what they're going to do for your business. And it's not about the individual person. It's just that in this industry, because there's so much unknown, because it is changing constantly, and because it's so hard to measure some of the results of this. As much as I'm all about metrics and measurement, there's a lot of things that's hard, like how effective was an Instagram campaign at driving overall sales for a site. That can be really hard to determine, even if you can collect direct conversions, purchases, but there's all that ancillary of like, oh well, they saw the image, they followed Instagram and they saw the images for like weeks and then came to the site and bought the product or something like that. That isn't going to get picked up by that. So that leaves a lot of wiggle room for people to be able to get back on their bullshit, basically.
Yeah.
And there are unfortunately, there are unscrupulous people who will do that, either knowingly or unknowingly. Like, for instance, a common practice in most major ad agencies, marketing agencies, is that you have your account manager, and they're handling your account, and you deal with them, and they're like a super nice, personable person like Megan from Nord Games. Who, I'm not saying that she was on account manager. She was the director of marketing, but I'm just saying, they're super nice, like she is. You get along with them. They're easy to work with. They are doing everything they can to make your account work, but they don't know how the tools that their agency provided to them are actually working. They don't know how the code is actually getting implemented. They don't know how the feed is actually getting processed. So if a company has put in something like, say, one thing I discovered recently for Nord Games was that an agency they had been working with had designed their metrics that they were getting from the website to cannibalize the traffic that was coming to the site from other sources. So like Nord Games has Google ads that they run. So this agency they were working with had set up their tracking on the site to take all the take purchases that were coming from Google ads and to count it as their own. So they were showing us a return on investment of about a 1.7 to 1. The reality was that the return on investment was negative 0.79. For every $5 that was being spent, only $1 was being made back on that campaign, but they were inflating it to make it look like they were getting almost $2 back for every dollar spent. And that was entirely because of how they had set up this just small conscious decisions they made in how they set up the code and the tracking. And that would be very hard to see other than that. I'm going through I'm a numbers guy. I'm a rules lawyer. I'm looking at numbers and like, these don't match. There's something wrong here, and figuring out what's going on. And luckily, I am a guy who knows the code and was able to figure this out. And we got a full refund for a year's worth of service from the company. It was contentious, but it was, and their account manager had no idea. She was appalled. She was stuck between a rock and a hard place. We genuinely felt for her because we knew that she had not been trying to consciously deceive us or anything, but at the same time, she wasn't equipped to know what her company was essentially doing behind closed doors or in the shadows.
That was an impressive sleight of hand check.
Yeah, exactly. And so, as much as I love what I do, there's a reason why my industry has the reputation that it does, and why I'm sure there are plenty of people watching this who have had bad experiences. That's not every marketer out there, but you definitely need to kick our tires. So, I said, even with my stuff, I think I'm pretty forthright and blunt, to be honest. But check me on my bullshit. Make sure I know what I'm talking about. And I'm sure I'm wrong sometimes. I'm just wrong sometimes. That being said, I've gotten $10,000 from Google for mistakes of theirs that I caught for clients, so I'm right a lot too.
Nice. So Eric has a question. Do you have any ideas how to rethink the standard city town guard tropes that could make for fun and unique gameplay experience opportunities? He's got a disclaimer in there, not trying to put anyone on the spot politically.
Yeah. So, yes, actually, I happened to be talking about this with some friends last night. Though, I do want to say, it is worthwhile. Think of the town guard as cops, because I did have to point that out once in a game where someone with the Watchman background for their D&D character wanted to take out an opponent that was already unconscious. You're the equivalent of a cop. So, the rest of you, what if you saw a cop doing this? And that certainly, that changes the lens that we normally look at D&D through. But that aside, I was thinking about, what if there was a city or a kingdom run by a glutton, a total foodie, but they're worried about rebellion, of course. They're a tyrant, a despot, and so all weapons have been banned, except for chefs and cooks, because they're allowed to keep the tools of their craft so that they can feed this guy. So you have mercenary companies, and a town like the town guard is actually essentially the town catering company, and every fighting school is a different cuisine, and so you have basically food mercenaries that are going around. The town guard wouldn't actually be the town guard anymore, but they're the health inspectors. And for instance, if you get into a fight without there being a prepared dish done at the end of it, everyone goes to jail.
Right,
then
so
you can have
yeah, right now I just started a new campaign in like this setting called I'm just calling it Court of Worms, where it's like run by dragons, and it's all the reptilian races, and humans are kind of more primitive and less civilized in that setting. So like the main races are kobolds and dragonborns, and your kobolds are your peasants, serfs, and craftsmen, and then the dragonborn tend to be the soldiery and basically would be also the watch. So like in that particular world, just a small thing like, oh well, if they're the watch, they're probably like 99% of the time they're going to be dragonborn, which when that gets interesting when you encounter like a watch member that's a turtle or a lizard folk or a kobold, because they're not usually in those positions of power. So you can create different dynamics that way too, by having like an absence of certain things in those tropes, and then adding it back in.
Yeah. It's I mean, anytime you can deconstruct an idea or a trope and find a new way to present it, I think that can always provide interesting ways to explore that idea in a game. As far as how to fix the concept of town watch in general. I mean, there's a lot of ways to handle it. The nice thing is that in D&D, as much as people like to complain about alignment, you do have an objective morality that exists. Like, regardless of mortals' individual morality, you have the concept of the alignment system. They've definitely de-emphasized it more in 5e, but you still have planes of existence and magical beings that are literally like concepts or human drives brought to life. And that provides an opportunity where you could have a society that is truly dedicated to like lawful good justice and has implemented maybe Logan's Run style hand crystals or something that basically tell you like, are you good or bad, or where are you falling on this spectrum, and then maybe get into and if I were going to do something like that, then what I'd want to get into is do like a whole kind of Altered Carbon style storyline where it's figuring out like who has found a way to corrupt the crystals so they can get away with heinous crimes without being identified for it. What if you lived in a society where everyone voluntarily subjected to themselves to some type of magical judgment, essentially, so that if you committed a crime, it would be apparent to everybody. So you don't need watch, because essentially you're like everything's being immediately reported thanks to magical divination, and the community is just kind of responding how they want to, which leads to maybe mob violence, leads to false positives, but it's a different way to explore that concept.
What is there's a movie with Tom Cruise in it where it's just that, it's like thought police, like they detect the crime.
Minority Report.
Yeah, that's it. They detect the crimes before they happen.
Pre-crime.
Yeah.
Coming soon from the Trump administration. But go on.
So what was I going to say? Although I do love your militarized catering companies. That's definitely unique and fun. But also too, like, what is the cutoff where there is a watch, right? Obviously cities have watches, but how big does a town have to be in order to actually have a watch? Or is it more like they have a volunteer firefighter department, right? Except for the watch, where it's just the citizens. Maybe there's one person that's in charge of it, and even they might still have a day job.
Right. I think when I lived in I grew up in rural New Jersey in Pennsylvania, and so when I was living out there, I remember living in some small townships where the nearest sheriff was 5 counties over, and or 5 towns over. Sorry, they were in the same town, but it was like 5 towns over. And it like when you moved into town, it was literally like, are you joining the PTA or the volunteer fire department? Like, it was one or the other, or both if you wanted. But it was just like everyone pitched in. It was a super small town, and yeah, like not every settlement's going to have that. If you know, Spectacular Settlements from Nord Games is a fantastic system agnostic book that talks about all kinds of stuff like this. So you can build anything from a tiny little like waypoint inn, like the one you see in Dragon Inn or Sword of Destiny, or you can do like a massive thriving capital city. Or giant fortress, or anything in between there. And like, as I said, system as not agnostic, available as a PDF on Nord Games, and the hard copy literally just arrived this week. We're waiting for it to go through customs before we'll be able to start shipping it out. I saw someone earlier was asking like what is needed or wanted as far as RPG products.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, so I know a big thing that we talk about a lot is making products for players as opposed to DMs, because most, whether it's WotC or anyone else, most of the books, a lot of the products are coming out like DMs are the ones buying them. I've been, one of the companies I work with has been looking at getting into minis, and one of the things we're asking about, like, who buys your miniatures? Like 9 times out of 10, it's the dungeon master. So it's like figuring out products that players want and then enhance the game for the players, and at the same time don't make it more complicated for the DM. That's like that sweet spot that we're still trying to figure out how to hit, because like that's where things like the little dice potion bottles come in. Like those are super cool, but it'd be nice to have some more stuff for players that we can push towards them. The alchemy book that we're working on, that was a big concern, was not turning it into a giant like side system like hacking in cyberpunk games, where it's like, okay, we're going to do this thing with 1 or 2 party members, everyone else, you guys do whatever for 45 minutes while we figure out how they made a leather cuirass, and then we'll get back to the actual D&D game.
Yeah, so it's super tough figuring out like those player products that are going to have appeal, because also the reason why I like those potions with the dice in it, or whatever, works so well is because they don't really require permission from your DM to show up to the table with that. But like any kind of product that you come up with, for the most part, it still has to get filtered through the DM, right? Yeah. And like you said, does it add complexity? Is it going to make the GM's job more difficult just because they have to learn new rules or see if this is acceptable in the game or not? That is like the tricky thing. I mean, like the next Kickstarter we're looking to be more player centric, but at the same time, you still have to think about, from the DM's perspective, is this going to be something easily added to the game? And even like when we come up with ideas, a lot of times, like I would rather us like pull back and be a little bit on the weak side, and be things that once the DM goes, oh, so and so made it, so sure, it's going to be okay, rather than them have to think about it and crawl over and make sure everything isn't going to break their game.
Yeah, and that's I think that's something that a lot of people, when they are trying to make, especially when they're trying to write a game product for the first time, can miss. Even if you have experience, you can miss that, is how is it going to be in play? Yeah. And that's something that I've talked about a bunch of. I'm in a 3.5 game with a bunch of old grognards, and I consider myself one of them. But Eric Boyd, Stephen Shen, Thomas Costa, George Krashos, Jeff Thetford, and Curry from Ed Greenwood's podcast. But like literally everyone in that group has like TSR writing credits from 2nd and 3rd edition, except for like me and one other dude. Yeah. and so I get to hear a lot of that, and a lot of like how much stuff was cut. Or Eric L. Boyd's, one of his biggest regrets from the Deities and Demigods series of books that he did for the Forgotten Realms, other than including the gnome deities. I don't know why he hates gnomes so much, but he does. It's a thing.
It's an old school thing, for sure.
You are risking a TPK if you push him too much on that. But anyway, but they included stats for all the gods, and he was like, he hated that, and he didn't, he didn't think it was a good idea. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he thought there's like, what DM is going to use this? Like, this is not how God should be played anyway. But on top of that, like, this is like only useful for a DM, and no DM's actually going to use this in play because, you know, especially in second edition, like, they're literally God characters. They'll just walk all over a party, and you're never going to have a need for that. But that is more than half of the copy space in the book. And he's like, I would have rather written about like rituals for all of these, and he has them. Like, dude has archives of notes of unpublished stuff from the Forgotten Realms that like never made it out there because they had to edit it out to make more room for like stats for things you were never going to use.
Well, there's the opposite problem of that, right? I don't know if you know who Noah Outweiler is. Counter Monkey Spoonie. He was like one of the really early YouTubers that talking about gaming, and one of his videos is, if you stat it, they will kill it. And that's essentially, that's the other thing. You know who those stats are for? They're for the players because they're scheming about how to murder that god.
Right, and that was something I ran into that with one of my groups. On top of all my like juggling, like marketing and stuff, I'm running. Am I running 6 games right now? Fuck. I'm running a lot of games. I do them every other week and stagger them. But one of those groups was pretty new, and I met them through Nord, and I wanted to give them an old school mega dungeon crawl, so I started running them through that. Like I said, I grew up with the old game styles, but they didn't. And one of the things I had to cope with was like, they didn't know that they weren't supposed to win every encounter. Like, they assumed that if there's a map, if there's tokens on it, we're supposed to fight it. And if we're supposed to fight it, we can win. And, you know, it didn't matter if it was like the tokens on the map was a literal horde of more than 100 like fire salamanders that I had labeled impending doom on the initiative track that's like just swarming towards them, and they know it's like trying to cut off their flank, and they're like, what could we do? I'm like, you could have not stood and fought every round. You could have double moved. I'm not even saying run. You could have just double moved, gone around the corner.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I eventually had to have the intervention as the DM. It's like, guys, like, you're not meant to win every combat. Like, well, there's a map and there's a token. It's like, yeah, I mapped the whole dungeon, all 200 by 200 grid squares of it, and you're only going to go through a portion of it, but it's all there. So if you go there, I'm ready. But you're not meant to encounter all this. Like, you know where they wanted to go straight for the big bad guy. And it's like, you guys are like level 8, and there's like multiple, like, you know, there's hundreds of bandits and demon worshippers and multiple greater demons there. So they decided to gate into the big bad guy, evil guy's room instead, or teleport in. But yeah, like, that was like a generational thing, because they had grown up on like maybe a little bit of 3rd edition or like 4th edition, and they were used to that video game approach of like, oh, it's an enemy encounter, we have to resolve this with combat and kill them. Whereas like, sometimes you're supposed to run away. Sometimes you're supposed to be forced to think about like, how do I use the environment, or what do I do here? Eventually, they decided to use the fire salamanders to lure them into chasing them toward the demon worshipping bandits. That was like, I was so happy. I literally was like, oh, thank you.
That is some old school D&D there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, you see, like, I see people online talk about random encounters, and they're like, I don't use them, I hate them, they're stupid. But I think they fail to understand, like, the purpose of the random encounter. Like, the random encounter was never about giving your players something to fight, even though that might be what happens. The random encounter spoke more of the world that you lived in than the game that you're running right now. Right? So I guess that's the difference between like the game that we used to play, and that now, you know, we've gone so far into the narrative and the storytelling elements. Well, the random encounter is part of the story from the world aspect of it. Like, it's a living, breathing world where things are going on, whether your characters are there or not, is kind of the idea. So, you know, yeah, you might run into 3 hill giants in your 3rd level, but you either run away, you hide, you negotiate. You know, like, if your toolbox is only, only hammers, then every problem looks like a nail, right?
Exactly.
But like you need to use something different for this. Like you're not supposed to fight it, and you can we can still tell different stories. And if you do fight it for like an early on party, I'm totally I'm gonna hobbit that shit, right? You try and fight 3 hill giants, you're gonna probably lose, and I'm not just gonna murder your characters this time. But, they're going to be in a cage at some point, and the Giants are definitely going to be arguing and fighting about how to cook them the best.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard for players to get that sometimes. And that's where, like, communication in the group, having a session 0, setting out the expectations are important. Like, for me, like, I had done that with this group, for instance, but clearly there have been things I took for granted, being more of I want to say old school player. And I'm not saying it's better or worse. It's just my style was different, and I was a new DM, and so I expected them to essentially read the cues I was giving them, and they weren't used to receiving that. They didn't know my DM language, essentially.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, and I'd had, like, for instance, I had a random encounter I had for a long time in that campaign was Paratons. I would just have them, like, way early on, but just see a shadow at night. Like, I always like to give them something. If they're resting, I'll make them all do perception checks, and I'll spend a little time like, okay, what order was that in? Like, okay, you got what number was that? Okay, let's see here. It doesn't matter. There's nothing. Like, I want to give them something, whether it's just noticing a phase of the moon or a local wildlife or animal or whatever to help with that world building. Also, I have most of my campaigns are interlinked, so I have 3 set in the Forgotten Realms right now, and the events in one, like, I keep track of the dates, so the events in one all affect the events in the other, and they hear about them. One of the problems I actually ran into with that at one point was I have a group going through Tyranny of the Dragons. They're uber high level. It's been a super intense campaign. There's been crazy stuff happening. This other group I had just started, they're like 3rd level or something, starts hearing about the Cult of the Dragon and run into some of their forces, and even ran into one of Arkin the Cruel's, like, minions and stuff. And then they're all gung-ho and like, oh, well, we have to go fight Tiamat. It has to be us. And I've told them, like, there's heroes that you've heard of that are doing this. And I had to do a lot of legwork as a DM to let them, like, this is flavor. This is meant to give you the sense of a real world. But if you go do this, you will die.
That is the nature of the beast, and that is sometimes the difficulty of, like, putting that other stuff out there that is either just kind of like flavor or background information, or you're just trying to make a little bit more of a living, breathing world, and your players will just latch onto something. And all of a sudden it's important. So, I mean, words matter, right? Especially when us as the GMs, we convey the worlds to our players. So everything that we say has the ability for them to interpret as being the important thing.
Yeah. Well, you create that context, and that's part of being a DM, I think, is that your job doesn't, your job doesn't have to end at the table. Those words that you choose and how you talk to your players, even outside of the game, can make a big difference. Like, my wife is in a bunch of my games. I will strategically leave game books open in, like, the bedroom or near my desk or whatever to give her peeks of things, to make her think that she's gotten an insight into what's going on, or sometimes to lead her down a wild goose chase. But yeah, I will. I think that sounds terrible when I say it out loud, but yeah, I run misinformation campaigns on my players, including my wife, when it comes to my games. I will absolutely emotionally manipulate them if I think I can, to get a better experience for them in the game. One of that same game with the players that we're all kind of learning each other's style, one of the things I did early in that game was when they were working on character development, one of them had this whole lost sister angle that they were going for. The other was going for this kind of crazy family heritage thing. So I asked them a couple of questions about this or that, or made a few suggestions like, oh, well, have you thought about names like this? And managed to manipulate one of the players into making his character the long lost sister of the other, who had been magically disguised and had like changed genders, used the old belt of gender swapping to like help them do like a witness protection thing. And so one of them knew that they were siblings, the other did not. They did not find out, like, that was not revealed until they were 10th level, going from first, like at the very end of that campaign, right before they went to go fight the big bad evil demon boss. But so it was so great being able to like push that together, and just through a couple of questions or suggestions as DM, I was able to get their independent backstories to sync up enough to make that happen and to make it seem totally organic. So that like when the players are thinking back, I'm like, oh my god, it was there the whole time. Like, why had certain bad guys kept misgendering the halfling wizard? It's because they had true seeing, you could see through his illusion. But that's the type of things that add that investment, that buy into the game, and where I really like to. That's the type of game I like to run. To be clear, not everyone needs to do that. Like, it's getting to random encounters. I think that's why not everyone likes to use them, because they can see it as being a distraction from the story that they're telling that they have not already worked in. Or it can also be like, you feel like as a DM, well, I have to make this seem more significant or work more, and that can be extra work that you don't necessarily want to put in there. I like to use random encounters, though. My issue with like VTT now, for instance, is that I have thousands of dollars of miniatures and terrain I've built up over the years. So when my home game, random encounter, whatever, give me 2 minutes, I will have a full encounter built. But now, like, I roll on a chart and roll 20 or Fantasy Grounds. If I haven't prepped that, it's like, crap, I need a map, I need tokens, I need monster stats, like, and that's not just grab it off the shelf and flip open to the appropriate book page. So it does take a little more prep.
I think it can be. It's just you switching gears, because we were talking about this yesterday a little bit, where there's where they were talking about doing just that. But it's probably just a mindset, skill set thing, where you're used to like, I just grab it off the shelf. Well, your shelf has changed because it's digital, and they're like, I just click Google a map, grab a map, import it, and do these other things. But it is like definitely, it definitely
can be helpful.
A new world.
Like, you do have to at least prep to be like, I need to have these on hand if I need. Like, I can throw together a random encounter on the fly in VTT now, but I had to, for instance, get the some of the map and token asset packs that are available for VTT from Nord Games, which you can get a 20% off on by using NordArchy20 at checkout. They have a variety of maps, tokens, and pre-built encounters ready for your VTT experience if you want to use that. That's a great way to make it easier. And also, for those who are looking for products that need to be made these days, VTT assets are very popular. And that's something where, like, if you have a company that you really like or products that you really like, and they don't have a VTT version of their adventure or token packs that match their NPCs or whatever, approaching them and saying, like, hey, I could do this for you. And, that is a way to help them. Most companies are looking for a way to expand their digital reach now, so that's a way to be able to approach people with a company with art products that they would very definitely want to get a hold of. One of the things I spent a bunch of time doing for Nord recently was getting all their adventures converted over to Roll20 by Tim P. GMing, who has a Kickstarter going right now for the latest of his Myth series adventure path. Super cool adventures. He's a guy who spends thousands of dollars on like art commissions and stuff to build his own adventures, and then he just gets like a couple $100 back to the Kickstarter, selling it that way because he loves it. But he's also fantastic for Roll20 VTT conversions for anyone who's looking to do that for their adventures.
I will have to get that name from you later, because we have our out of the box encounters that we have converted over to Fantasy Grounds. That's over there now, but we still have to get it into Roll20.
Yeah, it's a very different beast for anyone who's used both. Like, I'm not saying one's better than the other. It's just like it's a different skill set to use Fantasy Grounds than it is to use Roll20.
Yeah, they do different things. Like, so my experience is Roll20 is a bit more intuitive, but Fantasy Grounds, once you know how to use it, it does more stuff. Yeah,
exactly. That's been my experience with it as well.
And then I've also heard people mention the Astral as being a really good system. I have not used it yet, though.
I haven't tried it out yet. And I know some folks like to just use like Discord or something like that, and Dungeon Fog, which I love Dungeon Fog, by the way. I know they're a partner of you guys', and I love them for maps. For any of my cyberpunk or sci-fi games, they're some of the best assets for being able to quickly make that. And I love the dynamic lighting that they have in there. I wish there was a way to get that to translate over better to VTT. But
I think it does. I mean, someone was telling me that they use them directly from there.
Oh, you can. I know you can export them there, but
Yeah.
and I know there's a way to just run. Like you can run players through Dungeon Fog. You can just use it as an interactive map. You then just need to use like Discord or another chat engine to do like the dice rolling and stuff like that. So you can use it like that. I like having all the extra stuff in the automated rolls in like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds.
Yeah.
I'm using Fantasy Grounds to run my Pathfinder because it has the modules I was using and get the books through there. I've been using Roll20 for a lot of my 5e and Star Wars and other stuff.
So you said you're running 6 campaigns. What are you running?
Okay, so I have my Pathfinder game that is 18th level, Mythic Tier 4. That's the Iron Gods camp adventure path. That's been running for a couple years now, and that is my old school group. Like that group has been together since '79, I think. I obviously didn't start it, but like they had the same GM for 30 years, and then he had to take a step back, and I stepped up, and it's been me ever since. So there's my Iron Gods Pathfinder game. I have my Tyranny of Dragons 5e game. I have the kind of homebrew Forgotten Realms one I've been running on Mondays for Andrew Geertsen from Nord Games and his buddies. And they're the ones that have been going through that just went through the Mega Dungeon. I just stranded them on the Abyss, and we took a few weeks off from that campaign so I can figure out what the hell is going to happen to him next, or I guess what the Abyss is going to happen to him next. I have a Starfinder game that, and that one of the things I did with that one, actually, I had that in the Pathfinder game. I ran both groups at the same time going through the same dungeon, but one group was in the future and one was in the past. So as the Pathfinder group killed enemies, the Starfinder group would see their like bodies appear instantly desiccate like the old Time Machine movie, and then would rise as undead for the Starfinder group to have to fight. And eventually, they had to do all this like time exchange stuff where they're stealing time from each other, and one group had to go into the future while one went into the past. And also, I had time clones in that one, which was great. And that was where one of the party members found out that he was the evil twin. Like everyone else's time clones showed up. It was like from another reality. It's like, oh, here's the half orc hippie like psychic. Her time clone is this like brutal warlord who's the princess of the moon. She was a moon princess, just not a brutal warlord moon princess. Pathfinder's complicated, but anyway, yeah. So everyone's clone is like time clone is evil, and then the gunslinger, his time clone is a shepherd, the one that had never left his fiance. So I've got the Pathfinder and Starfinder.
Wait a minute, that was definitely our Bender's the evil Bender.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone realized like, oh shit, and then shrugged. I run a Star Wars game using the Genesis system from Fantasy Flight. Really enjoy that one. And then I run a Carbon 2185 game. That is Cyberpunk using the 5e system from Fat Dragon Games. Came out late last year, but it's a lot of fun. And I know the Quest and Chaos Twitch stream has been streaming. Like they have a regular game with Carbon 2185 they're doing in there. And is that everything?
That's not enough.
I think that's everything right now. Yeah. So all of those but the Carbon game are interconnected.
Okay.
All of them take place in the same, are connected directly or indirectly in some way. Oh, my Saturday game. I have a Saturday D&D game that started on the Forgotten Realms. They got a Nautiloid Spelljammer, and they've ended up stranded on Athos, on Dark Sun. So I forgot them too. So
do you play in any games, or you just DM?
I do. I just started getting to playing games again. It's nice. My Monday group, I alternate DMing. I was alternating DMing duties, so I get to play a Tiefling Bard in that game, which is a lot of fun. And then my wife just started running her first D&D game for my my Friday group, which was my Tyranny of Dragons game. And we're doing Rage of Demons. I have a bugbear ranger who's kind of a beast. It's a lot of fun, but spent the dungeon. We're still escaping from. We're literally at the beginning. We're still escaping from the drow.
Yeah.
But one of the first things he did was stab a drow guard through the head with his own sword, and then carried it around as a body shield.
as you do. That sounds like a very bugbear thing to do.
I was like, oh, yeah, I'm big enough. I've got the size bonus. Like,
well, bugbears are supposed to be really lazy anyways. Like, I can carry weapons, or, oh, you've got a sword. Here, come here.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me feed this to you.
Yeah, and it worked too. That body absorbed a couple crossbow bolts for me, so he made a good shield. But
cover.
Yeah,
boom.
I like to run. I like to run deep games. They're all interlinked. The time is not linear in all of them either, I should say, though my players still have not figured that out. They try. I bless them. They try, but they've not figured out. The events that have yet to happen in one of the campaigns triggered all the events that have already happened in the other campaigns, and they're all working their way toward triggering that initial event.
How do you keep that straight? I'm confused just listening to you.
My brain is made of spider webs, pretty much.
That'll do it.
Yeah, I shouldn't give away the big secret, but yeah, there's a lot, like my mother-in-law is a recurring character in my games as well. I commissioned art from an artist to make an NPC, and I had it based off of my mother-in-law.
Does she know this?
My mother-in-law knows it, and she loves it. My wife did not find out until I revealed it in-game to her, and there was it didn't register at first. Then, is that my mom? And I love Holina. She's a wonderful woman, and her character is not a villain. Dr. Sorrow is an agonist. A protagonist or an antagonist, they're an agonist. That's their role in my stories. But so far, Dr. Sorrow is in my Starfinder game, my Pathfinder game. Not directly appeared in the D&D game, but those are all connected, so they've had influence there. And then in my Star Wars game, they just encountered her for the first time and have started to get the implications of her being there as this rogue AI type of thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I don't measure my. A lot of people say as long as everyone at your table had fun, you ran a good game. And if I'm honest, no, that's not how it is for me as a DM. There are times my players have loved the game, and I've been disappointed in myself. And I know part of that is me being too hard on myself, but it's because I don't measure it purely on oh, did they have a good time killing things? Did I make anybody cry? Straight up, there's sessions where I'm okay, I'll know I did well if somebody cried, or if somebody loses it, if somebody gets really emotional. And that's the type of game that I like to run. And I'm not saying that's how games should be, but that's the type of game that I like to run. And what I offer to my players is if you want a game you can lose yourself in, and where you can get that emotional investment in things, then that's what I want to do. And circling back to random encounters, that's one of those ways that world building is how you do that. I think one of the reasons why people have difficulty with random encounters is because you're having to also try and figure out how do I turn this into something that's going to push the story forward or push the character investment. And we're used to being handheld a lot with the modern modules because they give us a lot of that. They give you your bonds that the characters have. They give a lot of times the opening scenarios are designed to get people invested, but there's still, even with that hand-holding, I feel there's still this gap of finding that way to really make players care about what's happening to their characters, the things that their characters are doing. And at the same time, if you grew up with old school D&D modules where it's just here's the monster stats and the room descriptions and how they're going to attack them, figure out a story for why your party's there, basically. We were used to doing that heavy lifting and weaving that in there. So you're you put in a random encounter and you're oh yeah, this isn't just some random enemy. Turns out these were bandits that are working for, Narenvane, who is the dragon cultist that you have just started to discover is actually the father that you thought was dead the whole time. I did that to one of my players when she joined the cult, the Tyranny of Dragons campaign. She had a dead husband and a missing daughter. Turned out the missing daughter was the half-elf rogue in the party, like as she joined, and the dead husband turned out was the big bad evil guy that they were fighting in the encounter she was introduced in. That
Surprise.
was yeah. That encounter ended with like her and him like first shouting at each other, and then they started reciting their wedding vows to each other, which I had given her like a long time ago in character gen. She had no idea why I'd be so specific. Well, this is why. And then like as she finished the vows, he ended up killing himself to like save the group essentially. And yeah, they ugly cried. Like that was like multiple people at the table were crying. The player involved was just like ugly crying. It was like, and as a DM, I was so happy. Like I was crying too because I had been role playing all this and like was in the moment. But you know, and I wouldn't necessarily call that fun, but it was engaging and it was cathartic and it was rewarding and my players enjoyed it. I mean, they told me They told me they enjoyed it. Like,
yeah.
I do worry. I'm not just like, oh, you're gonna like this or say nothing. Like, but yeah. So that's like, fun isn't always the metric that I'm measuring the success of a game by. I want that investment from my players, and not every game is like that, and not everyone wants that serious involvement and investment in a game. It takes a lot out of you.
Yeah, you know, different folks, different strokes. We game for different reasons, you know. And they're all kind of correct and right as long as your fun doesn't impede someone else's fun.
Exactly.
So we are past the hour mark.
Okay.
With that, it's time to wrap things up. Final thoughts before we head on out.
Thank you for having me. There's a lot of fun, and folks, make sure to get your discount at nordgamesllc.com/5.html. You can use NordArchy20 to get 20% off any of your purchases there, and it gives a nice little kickback commission to NerdArchy for their help in promoting Nord Games. I've also been working with Bard Games, the maker of Fickle, the fairy-based deck-building card game. It's a ton of fun, and the art is from Amy Brown, who did all that fairy art that you saw all over everything in the 90s and the early 2000s. And it is a legitimately good game. That's how I got involved, was playing the game at KublaCon, and I loved it. They also just released Lost Worlds of Josh Kirby, which has tons of beautiful sci-fi art. It's a really cool, innovative board game. And then as I've been working with startplaying.games, it's the actual website. It's like Airbnb for paid DMing. So if you want to just play D&D, you want to learn to play, you want to try it out, you can get a professional DM. It's averages about $20 per person for a 3-hour session. And you can find everything from one-shots to learn to play to ongoing campaigns there. Or if you are a DM and you think people would like to game with you and you want to make a little money doing it, you can register and sign up at startplaying.games to be able to start doing paid DMing.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, and until next time, stay nerdy.